Everyone, again, thank you for watching. This is Bruce Muffson, LCSW from Southern Ridge of Nevada, and we're here today for part two from last week's topic that we brought up on Alton Sterling, Philando Castile, Dallas, and what's been happening in America this past week with shootings of police officers. And our goal today is to readdress some issues that came up from last week, talk about people's response and their viewpoints and their thoughts, and then finally discuss transformations of change. What can we do to improve things so these things do not happen again and they're no longer an issue, with the focus of on training, personal responsibility, and self-awareness. Here we go. All right, last week we discussed what happened in Dallas, and then of course, unfortunately, what happened is that this week has been a horrendous week for law enforcement across the country. There have been police shootings in Georgia, Tennessee, Missouri, and Michigan, where essentially in at least several of these cases, almost deliberately, police officers were lured into situations where they were going to be shot at. And the results have been, of course, devastating. It's heightened suspicion and fear among police officers and communities that they work with, and lead to a lot of anxious moments for many, many people. And of course, this past week, the country itself has been gripped with dialogue on who's right, who's wrong, where to assign the blame to. Are we moving forward with this topic? Are we staying behind? And where are we going with this issue? Now, a couple of things I want to bring up from last week. I reviewed the videos again several more times to see if I could glean anything more from them. And what I talked about last week was the idea of understanding the need to take responsibility for one's actions. That is paramount, paramount, paramount. And I'm going to kind of talk about that throughout the entire time I'm talking. I cannot stress the importance of giving communities faith in you and having confidence in you by taking responsibility and saying, hey, we could have done things better, or even going even further, we made a mistake. We didn't do it right. We could have handled it better. And one of the things that's interesting I picked up from Alton Sterling was that he had said to the officers, what did I do that was wrong? He was confused himself. What did I do that I did that was wrong in your eyes, officers? And again, that goes back to understanding the need for training and communication and talking and saying, hey, here's the report that we got. I need to ask you a couple of questions. Are you armed? Anything on there sharp? Go with the dialogue if possible. We understand that we're not at all disparaging police officers who often daily put themselves in life and death situations where that could be. What all we're saying is, look at the dialogue, look at the conversation, and think to yourself, how do I approach the situation? And that's what we're talking about. Now, I also want to go back to the comment that was made, an interesting article I read last week, and I discussed this on the video, with some Kai Wright, who is a features editor of The Nation. And she made a comment about, actually I don't know if it's a man or a woman, I apologize, but this person made a comment that talking about law enforcement, they said they are our first responders, they're in our schools, they're immigration officers, and they're deeply enmeshed in communities, particularly those of color. And they are often what passes for social workers and mental health counselors. So they're armed. And she made a good comment, like, when it's basically kind of coming where I'm coming from, is that we need to do better training and often arm these officers, not just with Glocks and AR-15s, but also with mental health people with them. Having social workers ride along, having psychologists on the scene, or viewing from a camera to provide additional mental health support, or social awareness support, or clinical awareness support, and just critical thinking support. So before something happens, if someone's life is taken or someone is hurt severely, you have someone giving you additional support at the scene in lifetime. Now, I wanted to talk about some statistics that came up about how people view police, and particularly people of color view them also. Here we go. A 2015 Gallup poll found trust in police at its lowest level in 22 years. That was across all denominations. And only 30% of African Americans expressed such confidence in having confidence in the police. Only 30%. Research indicates that Black and Hispanic motorists are likely to be pulled over, to have their cars searched, and to be arrested, even though whites are often likelier to have contraband on them. A new study by the Center for Policing Equality at the John Jay School of Criminal Justice in New York documents that cops use force against blacks 3 times as often as against whites. So already you're seeing the disparity and the change in that. Also, other statistics show this. Often cops will say that the issue is justified because the person is, coming to them and they feel like their lives are in danger. However, in some cases, though, the reaction is excessive. Laquan McDonald, shot 16 times by a Chicago police officer, was walking away from the cops. Eric Garner, who died after being subdued with a chokehold, had no weapon even on him. And John Crawford, idly holding a BB gun taken off a Walmart shelf, posed no evident threat. One of the issues that these statistics are showing is that American police officers in general have a pattern of erring on the side of using deadly force because they generally are trained to do so and rarely occur punishment for it. American police kill civilians at rates 5 times higher than police in Canada, 40 times higher than in Germany, and 140 times more higher than in England and Wales. Is that because we have so much more violent crime, including gun crime? Partly, says the author of this study, Zim Ring, but the U.S. rate of killings by police is 10 times as great as the differences in homicides generally. Changes in how departments operate could save hundreds of lives a year. A report this year by the Police Executive Research Forum says, through de-escalation, meaning communication, effective tactics, tactical thinking, and appropriate equipment, officers can prevent situations from ever reaching the point where anyone's life is in danger and where officers have little choice but to use deadly force. Such reforms, it argued, can not only protect civilians but increase officer safety. So, making life safer for police and those they encounter is a goal shared by everyone. Why? It will take new approaches because the old ones are not good enough. So here, police review is saying, if you de-escalate, don't let things rise up, you tend to avoid things getting worse to a point that you can't go back. As a clinical social worker, again, as I said last week, I am not even pretending that I'm anything close to a trained police officer, However, I have numerous occasions where you had things go out of hand, people yelling, screaming, getting very verbal. I've only had a few instances of a knife or a weapon pulled on me or in a situation like that. But in those situations where things were hostile, people were angry, people were upset, what did I do? Used my most powerful weapon, my mouth. And if things were getting out of control, I looked at it tactically. If I needed to leave, I needed to get back up. And if I did do a takedown, it was with multiple people there, 4 to 6 people. There was a leader in charge. And when we put the person down, we try to do it safely. And he or she would be facing down. And there's no point are we leaning on the person's back with our knees because that increases the chance of someone dying. Going into arrest, asphyxiation, not a good thing to do. And when we had the person calm, because we would have that one person talking to him, turn the person over, still in control, talk, and go from there. That's what I'm talking about. Now, another comment from the Pew Research Center says in a survey that released last month, more than 4 in 10 African Americans doubt the nation will ever make changes necessary for racial equality with whites, and that nearly 2/3 of black adults believe blacks are treated less fairly than whites in the workplace. This is important for numerous reasons. If you don't feel that the playing field is level, you're always going to walk into a situation angry. There's immediately that sense of distrust, that sense of fear, that sense of anger. And if we can't get to the point, although this nation has made huge progress in race relations, but we still have many miles to go. But if you don't believe that the playing field is level, that everyone gets an equal shot, that's after all what America was founded on. The founding fathers coming here because they were being taken advantage of in Europe because they were the wrong race or the wrong religion. Religion was a huge issue in Europe. That's why people left to come to America. Then the golden rule of America is every man is equal. All men are created equal. That's in our Bill of Rights, our Constitution. That is the biggest point. And if people believe that they are not part of the mix and part of the group, they become disenfranchised, they drop out, they become angry, they use drugs and alcohol, and they're not going to be PMOS, productive members of society. And we can't afford that to happen because it affects everything else. If you're so nervous about worrying about being stopped by a police officer that literally you need your heart races and you start pumping, that's going to affect your stress level, your heart attack level, your stroke level, and you're not going to be effective in doing what you need to do for the rest of the day. Now, here in Las Vegas is that Reverend Dennis Hudson, he was a pastor of a church here, he said that he is concerned about a national tension that seems to exist between the police and the community that they serve. He makes an interesting comment. He goes, we need each other. We do need our police to enforce the law and protect us, but at the same time, we need our police force to have a healthy respect and appreciation for the residents that they've been entrusted to serve and protect. Okay, as a clinical social worker, I've worked in hospitals, outpatient settings, and I tell my workers, myself, always from an very early point, what is customer service? You're entrusted to protect. I take my job seriously. When I work with people, I'm always trying to give them as much validation and value as people. Because often when they see me, they're having the worst day of their lives. Mental illness, a breakdown, they've been at what's called L2K, where the police have taken them in, we're an ambulance, with a fireman, they had to go to a psych hospital, now they're coming to my hospital, or other situations. And I've had this in numerous hundreds, thousands of occasions, where they're seeing me for counseling, with the therapy, and something horrific has happened to them or their families. How I treat them goes a huge way to how they're going to view the mental health care system. And how people have early encounters with police and law enforcement in general goes hugely in how they're going to look at themselves as citizens, of law-abiding citizens, and feeling part of this country. And if you don't have that feeling, that's a problem. I like that line. They've been entrusted to serve and protect. You see that on every side of every police car. Serve and protect, serve and protect. Entrusted, meaning you're given a responsibility. And you got to think about, am I really equipped to handle it? Am I doing everything in my power to do my job correctly? Because I'm entrusted to serve and protect. When I put on that shield, when I put that uniform on, I'm entrusted to serve and protect to the best of my ability. And am I doing that every single day? And he says, ultimately, Hudson says, the answer lies in seeing police as human beings, so that they may see us as human beings. And I think if we can do that, it'll be a whole lot better. Obviously, in cases where it's egregious and you're following the law and you wind up getting shot or severely hurt, obviously that goes out the window. But the Reverend's making an excellent point. When you can be appropriate, be appropriate. It goes two sides also. Personal responsibility. Now, in these cases, obviously, things went way out of line, and we get that. In Dallas, it went way out of line what was done to the police officers. And what happened this week in Georgia, Missouri, Tennessee, out of line, completely inappropriate. There's nothing to justify it, nothing to excuse it. People were hurt, people were shot, their lives are shattered. There's no excuse for that. We're not even condoning that for 1 second. What we're saying is, when you have the ability, show personal responsibility for your actions. Both sides, in a sense, have to dance together. If you want to have an effective dance, you have to dance appropriately and effectively to make it work. And that's what's lacking often in the discourse between law enforcement and the people they're protected to serve. And law enforcement has to go a huge way to regain the trust of the people that they're working with. When you do counseling, as an expression, as a thought and process, that even when you meet somebody for the first time, you can tell within 1 minute if you're going to like that person or not. Your biases are coming out, whether you like this person or not. And that has to be improved in a sense of when people are stopped by police, it's not a sense of, oh my God, this may be my last moment on life because something is going to happen that I can't control, to an affirming and reassuring encounter. And if you're a violator of the law, you're duly punished. And if you're not, you go on your way, but you look at the officer as a help, not something dangerous. And that's what's missing with the dialogue today. Now, here's another thing also. African Americans, like Americans in general, like guns. And you have increasing numbers of African Americans that belong to gun clubs and like carrying firearms. Now in Texas, you have what's called an open carry. So here's a person of Yafua Balagun. He keeps a 12 gauge Mossberg, which is a shotgun, slung over his shoulder. Why is that? Because he patrols his Dallas neighborhood and he promotes the benefits of legal gun ownership to people like himself who are black. So what happened at the rally that took place? What happened is that the presence of long rifles, like the groups that he belongs to, openly caused some unease in Dallas. People released a photo of a person in a camo outfit, and he had a gun slung around his body, calling him a suspect, but it turned out the man had not been involved in the shooting. So here, even African Americans who are NRA members or belong to gun clubs or enjoy the right to carry firearms, they're still being seen as suspects, they're still being seen as problems, and the feeling is like, oh, trouble, trouble, trouble. Here's the thing also. Even Castile, even Philando had said that he had talked about this with his mother, according to the mom. He had pondered the dangers of being a black gun owner hours before his death, his mother Valerie said in an interview with CNN. He was at her house discussing his concealed carry permit with his sister, who also has one, Valerie Castillo said. And you know what? He goes, I really don't even want to carry my gun because I'm afraid that they'll shoot me first and then ask questions later, Valerie Castillo recalled her daughter saying. And that's the thing again, is that even if you have the right to carry a gun, because of how you're viewed with the biases and the anger and the suspicion, you're even at a heightened risk for still being shot multiple times. Now, something interesting that I read, that area where Philando Castile was shot outside of Minneapolis has a population of less than 10% African Americans. I think it's 7%. Yet in that same cluster, or that same intersection where he was shot, stopped, and then shot, more than half the people arrested were African American. So even though you were less than 10%, I think it's like 7%, half of the stops were made to people of color that were traveling in the area. So already you see the disconnect and the problems that are going on again and again and again. Now, here's what's happening since what's happened in Dallas. And the police chief said, that Chief David Brown, that he and his family have received death threats ever since a sniper killed 5 officers there last week. And he was saying this. He said that there's challenges here. He said that police are facing increasing pressure from all sides, and he was considering mandating that all of his force seek counseling in the coming months. And he said, for those Americans demonstrating against police in their own cities, Brown had a message. Become a part of the solution. He says, we're hiring. Get off that protest line and put your application in. And we'll help you, we'll put you in your neighborhood, and we'll help you resolve some of the problems you're protesting about. He's reaching out. In his own way, he's saying, you want to be part of the solution? You need to be part of the change. And the change is become active. Join police departments. Become probation and parole officers. Become social workers. And go to the communities that you're living in that you feel are that are not being treated fairly. Become part of the solution. Become part of it. Become a familiar face. Why not? And that's what he's saying. And here's an interesting comment also. Many of the victims were taken to Parkland Memorial Hospital in Dallas. And trauma surgeon Brian Williams, African American, struggled to contain his feelings. He said, I understand the anger and the frustration and distrust of law enforcement. But they're not the problem. Law enforcement by itself is not the problem. The problem is the lack of open discussions about the impact of race relations in this country. The killing, it has to stop. The problem is the lack of open discussions about the impact of race relations in this country. No one wants to talk about it. And until we talk about it, and the vitriol and the anger that comes from being a minority, we're not going to move forward. And that's where we're losing the focus and we're losing the battle. And until we do that, we are not going to go forward. I want to, I'm getting close to the end, but I want to share some things. Trevor Noah, who is the new host of The Daily Show, He made a comment. He said that it often seems, and he's from South Africa, a country that knows a huge amount about racial issues. He said that you can't speak about an issue without being forced onto a particular side. He referenced Las Vegas, the city that I live in, that in 2011, the city admitted there were better ways to interact with the community, resulting in a decrease in officer-involved shootings. The actions came after the newspaper, the Review Journal here, published a series of articles, Deadly Force When Police Officers Shoot and Kill. And Noah adds like this, he goes, you can be pro-cop and you can be pro-black. It's what we should all be. It's what we should be aiming for. You shouldn't have to choose between the police and the citizens they are sworn to protect. Sworn to protect. And that goes back to, again, what kind of training are these officers getting? Because in both cases of Alton Sterling and in Philando Castile, and even in the marches, I get a sense of confusion. I see when I watch the march, I see a lot of people milling about, walking up and down the block, staying on the street, going on the sidewalk, blocking traffic. You don't get a sense that there's cohesion going on. I don't get a sense that it's an orderly march, it's planned out, that there's a thorough understanding of what's going to happen. We're going to go here, we're going to go here, we're going to go here, we're going to stop here, and at this time, we call it off, it's over. It's just people milling about. And you have police officers and you have protesters or people marching, and you don't get a sense that either side really knows what the other side is thinking. I don't get a sense that there's a timeline, there's like a parade rep, there's preparation. It's just confusion. And when you have confusion, that gives a chance like that person to kill 5 police officers who take advantage of confusion, who take advantage of people being unprepared, and that's the best time to create havoc and mayhem. Because for a while, Dallas police thought that people who were legally carrying guns were part of the problem. It wasn't just one gunman, it could have been a dozen. They were unsure for several hours. Tactically, who's responsible? Who's aware of what's going on? And that's the problem. You saw the case of the woman holding a flower, and the 2 officers racing to grab her because she was one of the protesters in one of those rallies. And you got such a sense of disconnect. Like here she's dressed, here's how they're dressed, and who's able to make a determination of like, let it go, let it go. Let's be tactically smart before we're seen as reacting. Training, 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 training. How often are these officers being trained? Is it once a year for 2 hours? In my opinion, it should be monthly. As someone suggested to me, at least twice a month for half a day. Pull somebody off the street and train them how to react to community policing, which is being involved with the community that you're entrusted to serve and protect. How often is it actually happening? How about mental health training? So many more people, death by cop, shot by cop, suicide by cop, because they're mentally ill. The number of mentally ill people continues to soar, and they often use law enforcement as their way of carrying out their unhappy lives, their depressed lives, their bitter lives. So what kind of training are officers being given with mental health people in general? Now, obviously these 2 cases don't apply, but that's a growing trend. And also, why not have more people involved before you make a decision that could have life or death consequences? Cities like Reno, for instance, they have social workers that ride along with their sheriff's deputies on cases involving mental health situations. Other cities do too. Baltimore, for instance, they pioneered that. You have a social worker riding with a sergeant, like 10, 12 officers that are assigned to mental health cases. Have someone trained in mental health. Have someone train if there's been a situation with a gang war going on, where like in Chicago, get input from different professions and say, look, our tactics are not working. Clearly Chicago is not getting better, it's getting worse. So the police department doing the best they can, no one's denying that. They'll have 5,000 officers, they'll have reserve officers, but the killings are not ending. So what can you do, since that woman, Kay Wright, said, that, I don't say woman again, that person said, bring in, if they're often acting as our social workers, what training do they have on community awareness, on understanding dynamics of people, of situations, of gangs, of mentally ill, of even stopping someone at a traffic light? The lawyer for the officer accused of killing Alton Sterling, that's being accused of that, is saying now, well, Alton Sterling resembled the suspect in a robbery. I think it was an armed robbery. He vaguely resembled the suspect. I mean, of course, there's a million holes to that story. That's what the lawyer is saying. We get that. But even if that was the case, you had a 4-year-old in the car. He had his girlfriend with him. Even if he was the suspect and was the person, is it likely he's going to do anything that insane with a child in the car? Doubtful. Probably not. You could have handled it on a different level. We're talking about training. Our officers deserve it. They need it. They do a very, very difficult job. And that's what has to happen. Get the involvement of a social worker, of a psychologist. What they're going to be paying out now for these 2 deaths, and for Dallas, millions of dollars, where training would be like 1/100th of that amount, would save them the amount of money and the anger, the despair, the bitterness, the rage, the hatred, that all these other situations that happened this week of cops being shot all over America does not have to happen. Now, again, we talk about prevention. This is our focus. Prevention. We're not trying to talk about a situation. We want to talk about a solution as well. Here are our solutions. Here is my input. And again, I want comments. I want your thoughts, good and bad. We could hear everything. We want to hear from you. We want to make this into an open dialogue. And your comments inspire us, give us things to think about and talk about and prepare, and we want them. Everybody, thank you for listening to this topic, and we appreciate you very, very much. Thank you.